Papers and head on up. We'll sit right here in the front row as we kind of get set up for that. Okay, I think we're there. So it's easy to forget something if you just read it. If you see it and you read it, it's a little less hard. If you see it and you read it and you act it out, you're probably going to remember it a little more. So I was thinking about that. I says, you know, we all heard the story of Job, but yet I think I always forget the lessons of Job. So hopefully we can see it, read it, and act it out this morning to hopefully remember some of the lessons of Job before we get into our sermon this morning. And I've asked some of our young people to help us out to work on this. So this is a little skit. There's a little background to this in the fact that Kylie and I are going to be our narrators, and we are Darren and Brooke. And we need to buy it.
Is Job here?
Joe's going to have to share. I don't have a mic. Oh, unless you want one of these.
Yes.
That'll probably work.
I'll grab it.
Okay. Darren and Brooke enter. Darren, are you ready for imagination and time travel?
Definitely.
Darren holds up the Bible while he and Brooke open both the Bible together, eyes wide. Oh, wait a minute. Now we're getting there. We're getting there. Let's see. Job crawls in. Brooke,
I'm sorry. Job.
come on in.
Whoa, okay. I was not ready to see something like that. Wait, who is that and what's wrong with him?
I'm feeling like we're in the time of maybe where Abraham lived.
So, where are we?
Let's see. What does this book say? I think it is the land of Uz. Oh yeah, and that man that came in here, I think he's Job, according to what I see in here.
Did he do something wrong to deserve some kind of punishment?
He doesn't look so good, does he? Actually, he did not do anything wrong.
Well, so he was perfect?
Well, I wouldn't say that he was quite perfect, but he was a man who feared and worshiped God. He got married, he had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and had been very rich with many servants.
So what happened then?
God allowed Job to be tested.
Why?
Well, if you think about it, if all you tell people is that God is always there for you, but you never go through anything bad, how can you prove to people, how can you prove that to people or see it for yourself?
So how was Job tested?
First, many of his animals were stolen. Then some of the other animals and servants were killed in a fire. On the same day, all of his sons and daughters were killed in a great windstorm.
Job must have been very angry.
Well, actually, it says in here that that Job fell to the ground and he worshiped God, understanding that God gives and God takes away. Job remained faithful to God.
I have a feeling that's not the end of it.
Well, actually, no, that's not. Next, Job's health began to suffer. And it says here his entire body was covered in painful boils.
Ew.
This kind of talk is foolish. Should we only accept good from God and not accept adversity?
Well, Job, look what God has allowed. Do you still say you did nothing wrong? You should curse God and die. This is unbelievable. Well, maybe your friends can talk some sense into you. Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, and Elihu are here. I'll send them in. It's time for them to come and talk some sense into you.
Job?
Yes.
I could not recognize you. Well, we have come to sympathize with you and bring you comfort.
Oh, thank you.
What are they doing?
They are weeping and praying for Job without speaking one word to him.
I suppose when someone is suffering that much, what can they even say?
I don't know. It says in here that they kept going on for 7 days and 7 nights, and they sat on the ground before they even spoke to Job.
Well, I wish I had never been born.
Job breaks the silence with lots of mournful talk about wishing he had never been born, because at least he would have never had existed to feel this sort of pain. Although a little angry, Job never curses God.
Okay. Like the one verse says, be angry, but do not sin.
Yes. The story goes on. His complaining finally ends with something like,
I am suffering so much, even though I have done nothing wrong.
Will you be patient if I say something?
Job's friend Eliphaz goes on to say a lot of things. But the main point to everything was,
In the past, you have helped those who were weak and told them to be strong. But now you have been weakened and look, you are complaining. Why not call on God and see if He will answer you? Can God do anything? And God is just. So God should help you, yes? And if you have done something wrong, you should be happy that God is disciplining you.
That advice doesn't sound too bad.
Show me where I am wrong, and I'll stop my complaining. But can you blame me? Look at all the things that have been happening to me. Although I'm thankful that I still have the words of God with me, your words are not helping me one bit. You try going through this, and we'll see how you will act.
Okay, that was not the best advice, apparently.
yeah, I don't think so. We'll see what else happens here. Oh, it's Gilead's turn.
Traditionally, God rewards the good and God punishes the bad. Obviously, you have done something wrong. Otherwise, God would have restored everything to you already.
Ouch. Now that was harsh.
And long. Then, Job's reaction to that was basically,
You know, tradition is not our best source of knowledge. Although our elders have wisdom, they are not perfect enough themselves. God reveals Himself in nature, showing us that we could never totally understand God and all of His ways. I am in God's mercy, not yours. You cannot judge my heart.
true dat. But let's go on to see and hear what Zophar has to say.
Your words cannot keep us quiet, and you cannot speak for God. Just as you said, who fully knows God's ways? But let us just look at the facts. You probably deserve to suffer even more than you have. You probably do. Than you have been, because God is merciful. You need to search your heart and confess. I know that if you do confess, God will reward you with righteousness.
Ooh, now Zophar is speaking for God.
And he's kind of dribbling over with promises that he really has no control over. I think Job goes on to react to Zophar.
You know, I think I'm nothing but a joke to you. Just because you are not suffering with me, and I am the one suffering, does that make you wiser than me? I have been I've been a wicked, and I have seen some wicked men become rich. So then, why would these righteous men suffer? Let me argue my case before God, and not with such worthless friends.
Now Job is getting self-righteous.
And let's see, after Job's long reaction, Eliphaz speaks again with something like,
This conversation is not going anywhere, except that you've now made me very angry. Who do you think you are? I came here to comfort you, and you argue and attack me. And some of what you've said proves that you have turned away from God, which shows that you have sinned and deserve to suffer. Listen to my wisdom. The wicked definitely suffer, and if they do become rich, their riches do not last.
Are you really understanding any of this?
sounds kind of like an argument to me, a really, really long argument.
Arguing never accomplishes anything.
Well, let's see. So after all of that, Job is ready to talk again.
You know, this is not the way to comfort me. You coming over here like this. You are the ones who are arguing and accusing me. And not only that, God has worn me down and is just using me for target practice, even though God knows that I'm innocent.
I would not say that about God.
Yeah, you're not suffering like Job is.
True, Dad. Okay, I would hope that I would not say stuff like that about God.
So then it says here, Gilead gets another turn.
We'll talk more. Once you become responsible, it's obvious you must be cursed. I doubt you even know God at all.
Now that is just wrong on so many levels.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm thinking that Job has another reaction here.
How long will you torment me? Even if I have done nothing wrong, I certainly do not deserve this. I blame God. You know, God has taken everything away from me. But hear my words. I know that my Redeemer lives. And even if I die, I will see God in heaven.
Okay, I was not expecting that.
At least Job has not lost all hope in God. Yet obviously Zophar still does not believe what Job is saying.
Well, I may not know what it is exactly, but I do know that you have done something wrong to deserve all of this.
More self-righteous accusations is what I hear. So Job responds.
Now listen here carefully. There are times when wicked men die peacefully. I'm sure if you asked around, you'd find someone like that, but their punishment will come afterwards. I'm suffering because it is God's will.
And then, let's see, there's more, and then there's more, and then there's more.
Do they say anything new?
No, it looks like they just really like to argue and say hurtful things. and hear themselves talk.
And try to figure out God. So do they ever end the argument? Do they ever apologize or reconcile?
Well, eventually, after they all had talked it out.
Who's that? He hasn't spoken yet.
His name is Elihu, the youngest one there. Now he feels like it's finally his turn to talk.
I see. Does he add anything there?
Well, it says here that he is angry with Job for thinking he is totally innocent and for blaming God. He is angry that the three friends who accused Job of sinning, he feels that wisdom comes from God and not necessarily from older men.
So, more of the same?
Yeah, I would say more of the same, except this one part here.
God can use suffering to make us listen.
Okay, we hadn't heard that one yet.
Elihu is wise in not speaking at first, but then he made up for lost time. And he rambles on and on and on. Until finally, it's God's turn.
Uh-oh.
It looks like 6 pages where God is doing all the talking. And he is basically saying,
how can a creature analyze the creator of the entire universe? Even though you are my servant, who are you to question what I do or what I allow?
I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted, or should be questioned. I do not need to understand why I suffer. I don't need to understand why I suffer. I just need to remember that you are in control, and that you do love us. It is a great comfort to know that the God who created the universe wants to be our Heavenly Father, to have fellowship and a close relationship with us.
well, that's pretty good. But then God speaks to Job's friends.
My wrath is kindled against you because you have not spoken of me what is right as my servant Job has. Job will pray for you and as you confess and make sacrifices.
Is that how it ends?
Well, it says here that God was just. He restored all of Job's fortunes. Everything he had before was given back to him twice as much. And Job's health is restored.
Oh, I'm so happy.
Job and his wife have 7 more sons and 3 more daughters.
Wait, if God doubled everything, shouldn't they have 14 sons and 6 daughters?
Yeah, I guess you're right there, but I think Job will see them in heaven.
Makes sense.
And God blessed Job with a long and happy life.
Let's celebrate.
I'm so glad God is always there for us, no matter what we're going through.
All right, very good. Thank you all.
Amen. Good job.
The story of Job, the book of Job. Job is one of those stories in the Bible that you look at it and you just kind of have to scratch your head and you're saying, wow, glad I'm not Job. Glad I'm not Job. But eventually, sometime in your life, you will have a situation where if it hasn't happened, it will happen, where you will be like Job and you will say, Lord, why me? You live long enough, you'll have that question, Lord, why me? And when Job had that come upon him, he had some very interesting friends come along. The book of Job is probably one of the oldest books in the Bible. And we say it's probably one of the oldest books in the Bible because it is written kind of in a style, the literary style, and the way that it's written is pretty old, contemporary with, you know, with the Abrahams. I'm on here, yeah. And so when we look at the book of Job, we have to kind of think this is way, way, way back. This is back early Bible times. The book of Job. Why suffering? Have you considered my servant Job? When I was in medical school, I had a class that I had to take. And it was, I can even remember the day and where we're at. We're in the physiology department, and the guy who was teaching it was a religion professor who was in the Department of Holistic Medicine, I believe is what they called it at Loma Linda. And I even think his name was Glazer. But I remember him opening up the book of Job in the middle of medical school, and I said, "Oh, is this theology? Is this theology, or is this medical school?" I'm kind of confused. Are we studying about anatomy, or the heart, or what are we getting in the book of Job? And it didn't seem very applicable at the time. But for the first time in my life, I looked at the issue of suffering, and I understood a new realm of what suffering has to deal with. If you're a physician, you need to figure out where suffering fits in the plan of salvation, the plan of God. Why is a all-powerful, all-loving God allow suffering to exist in the world? Furthermore, we ask, why do righteous suffer? In the book of Job, we have an example of a very righteous man who suffered greatly. We had our little skit here. Questions that come up. Why does Job suffer? Why does God allow Job to suffer? What do we learn from Job that will encourage us today in the area of suffering? Does suffering always result from sin? I've had lots of people say that, you're sick, you've had this, you've had that. Well, it's obviously because there's a problem in your life. Uh-oh, now I did it. I gotta go back here. I think this is, let's try that. People say that, the reason that you have suffering or you have sin is because you are not right with God. But really, does suffering result from sin? There's a lot of passages in the Bible that say it may. There's a lot of times that Christ healed this guy was brought down from the roof of the building, and the friends were there, and they let him down on this little hammock, and he says, your sins are forgiven. And then the paralytic is able to walk. So the reverse of that is if you're paralyzed, you've sinned. So the Bible does say a little bit something about if you're suffering, then you've done that because of sin. The other answer that I've heard is you're suffering because you need to learn something. You're suffering because you're not right with God. God's trying to teach you something. Let's look a little bit more at this book of Job to see some of these answers. In the land of Uz, there was a man named Job, and this man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. If somebody wrote something about me, I wish they would write that. It may not be true, but I wish they would write that. Blameless, upright, and fear God and shun evil. That's something to shoot for. I see a lot of targets, aspirations of men that are so petty and stupid. If you're a man growing up in this world, if you want to fear God, shun evil, be blameless and upright, that's a good target. You got to shoot for that. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 oxen, and 500 donkeys. Now, if you're doing the math and you're quick with the price of all that, it's about $7 million in today's economy. Job was not poor. And we could go off and talk about how, we talked a little bit about that in Sabbath school this morning, about the rich versus the poor, and about how we are supposed to treat those with less. Job was upright and blameless, but yet he was a multi-millionaire. He was the greatest man among all people of the East. In Job 29, it talks greatly about Job's past history. We don't see it here in Job 1, but we do see it there. Job 29 talks about when Job was in his prime, when he was in the glory days of his youth. He used to have the young men would stand up when he walked by. The old men would step aside. He was so revered in the community. He was so held in such high esteem that people said, there goes Job. There goes Job. Job was such a wise man. His sons, one more thing. This one comment to me, it says it's not a book of Job, it's a book of Job. I'm like, well, I guess it is pronounced Job. It's only Job in the Bible. It is Job. I mean, you search for Job and you come up with Job, J-O-B. Why is Job called Job? Because in Job 29, it talks about how Job helped everybody who needed a job. Everybody who needed work, Job provided a job. Job helped out the widows, Job helped out the orphans, Job helped out those who didn't have the resource and assets to help themselves. Going onward, his sons used to take turns holding feasts in their homes, and they would invite their sisters to eat and drink with them. Now, I don't know why they did that. It seemed like they had Christmas continually with feasts in their homes. But in my mind, Job raised some good kids. The kids liked each other. The kids wanted to be with each other. Where do they learn how to do that? Do my kids, they like each other that much that they want to have a celebration? And that's an aspiration to shoot for, isn't it? Raise your kids so that they like each other so much that they want to be with each other, to have feasting and drinking. When the period of feasting had run its course, what did Job do? Job got on his knees and prayed for his kids. Maybe one of my kids have sinned. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering, each of them thinking, perhaps one of my children had sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular custom. You pray for your children? You pray for your children every day? You can learn a lot from Job, not just about suffering. Pray for your kids every day. One of the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. Is this part of the same narrative, or is this something totally different? Did Job just all of a sudden take a jump off the edge here? Where is this happening at?
Some concert or something in heaven.
Yeah. This is something different. This is a trial in heaven. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also with them. Satan is capitalized in my Bible, but probably at the time this was written, Satan was not considered a pronoun, or it was considered a pronoun, and it wasn't really to be capitalized. So here's the Lord. He's in this throne, and there's this trial coming in, and people are coming in. Well, I should say not called people. Beings are coming in. Some beings are angels. And these angels present themselves to the Lord. One of them comes in, his name is Satan. Where'd Satan come from? God says, hey, where you been? Do you think God didn't know where Satan was from? Didn't God kind of kick him out and send him down to the earth? Didn't he force him to be on the earth? So why did God ask that question? Why is it in the Bible? You always ask yourself, well, if it's duh, God knew. Why did he ask the question? He asked the question for you and me, because we have this picture. Where have you come, Satan? Satan answered the Lord, from roaming to and from the earth and going back and forth from it. He didn't answer something like, I was just passing by the earth and I just kind of took a look at stuff there and then I went on. No. We learn so much from the book of Job that's not actually, it's what's not written there. Job cannot leave this earth. God cast him down to the earth. So my question is, who is the representative from earth? That's Satan. Who is the ruler of the earth? That's Satan. Who's the one that can't leave the earth? You know, in the second coming, when God takes us back, we're going to leave the earth. Can Satan leave the earth? Job tells us so much more than just about suffering. Satan, then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is none like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." Who initiated the pedestal for Job? Was it Job? Hey, I do good. God likes me. I'm great. Devil can't tease me. God said, "My servant Job is upright and blameless." I hope God says that about me. I hope God says that I'm a man who fears him. Satan replies, "Does Job fear for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him, his household, and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds spread throughout all the land." Let's go through this just a little bit. We have a trial in heaven. Who's on trial? God. Who's the accuser? Satan is the accuser. Who's the jury? Angels and us. Because obviously God said, where are you from, Satan? He knew where he's from. Why is it written in the Bible? It was written for us. Who offered Job up as the example? God did. Here's the big deal for me. I did not know this existed until that day in medical school. Who says there's a hedge? Verse 9. Does Job say that there's a hedge? Does Job say that God is protecting me? You know, we have 15 verses. We have 9 verses here that talk about Job and his life. Does Job say, "I am so blessed because of this hedge. I am so blessed because God has protected me. I have wealth. I have family. I have servants because of the hedge"? Does Job talk about the hedge? No. The only person who sees the hedge is Satan. When we ask for blessings from God, when we want blessings from God, it is so hard for us to see it. But the devil can. Because he can't get through the hedge. The hedge is there. The hedge is erected by God. And it's the next verse that tells us the author of suffering. So, did Job erect the hedge? No. Does Job pray for the hedge? No. Where does the hedge get its power from? It's from God. I said, Caleb, I'd put this in there for him. It's like the Star Wars force field. I don't know if you've ever seen those kind of like little video games or whatever, but you know, they have this base or something. All of a sudden, this clear plastic bubble over there, that's the hedge. And so, all of the enemy can't penetrate the base because it's got this clear plastic bubble. When you and I pray for God's blessing, when you and I take the name of the Lord with us every day, the little clear plastic bubble goes up. We don't see it. We don't know it. We can't imagine that it's there. But Job tells us that it exists. This meeting in heaven tells us that it exists. All right, continuing on here. Job goes on to say, "But stretch forth your hand and strike everything he has." I mean, the devil goes on to say in Job here, "Stretch forth your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse your face." So the Lord said to Satan, "All right, very well then. Everything he has in your hands. But the man himself do not lay a finger." And so Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. So obviously this is not in the earth, because Satan's on the earth. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Who was the one who was protecting Job? It's God. Who is the one who wants to cause harm to Job? It's the Satan. Who is the one who's caught in the middle? it's Job. We get so confused when suffering happens. We get so down when suffering happens. It must be my fault. It must be something I did. It must be that God doesn't love me. It must be that I'm not in the right relationship with God. On and on and on. The book of Job is in the Bible because it clearly explains the author of suffering, and it's not God. Job goes on. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it says, naked I came, and naked from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gives, and the Lord taketh away. Bless the name of the Lord. If you had pain and suffering from the devil, if you had sores, if you had your house taken away, your family taken away, your kids, your donkeys, your cattle, everything taken away, including painful sores, cancerous sores, would you bless the Lord? Job 122. All throughout this, Job did not sin or blame God. He lost his house. He lost his family. He lost his kids. He lost his cattle. He lost his donkeys. He lost his servants. He lost everything. Then there's another test. Job has another test. Chapter 2. Another day, the angels came to the Lord to present themselves. Satan was also with them, to present himself before him. The Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered the Lord and said, from roaming to and fro back from the earth. And then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? So did Job sin the first test? Nope. He's still a servant of God. Still doing the same thing. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is none like him on the earth. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil, and still maintains his integrity, though who enticed him? Though you enticed me against him to ruin him without any reason. Now wait a minute, time out. Who's bigger? God. Satan enticed God to do something bad against man. Is that really what it says? Does anybody entice God to do anything? Isn't God ultimately powerful, ultimately knowledgeable? Is God without reason, even with Satan? The answer is no. When Satan accuses God, God will answer. Even it goes to us. God is up here, we are down here. No matter what, if we come to God, God will answer. God answered Satan with the test. In the end, the test was skin for skin, the truth comes out. Satan knows his true motive, and we are caught in the crossfire. So in this second test, Job 2, the second test, now we have the true reason that the devil has come to God. It is not because he says, Job, because hoop number 1, jump through it. Okay, I did that. Well, I still don't believe you. Now jump through hoop number 2. Well, wait a minute. I thought you said you'd believe me if I jumped through hoop number 1. Now you're going to make me jump through hoop number 2? Job didn't curse God. Job had everything taken away and he still didn't curse God. Satan says, well, that's not enough. I'm going to have him boils and sores and all kinds of stuff. Classic bait and switch. First it was about the hedge. And the second test is about suffering. So there's a trial going on. The trial is in heaven. And who's on trial? God is on trial. And who is the plaintiff or the accuser? It's Satan. Never forget that. God is on trial. And who is the accuser? It is Satan. God is always on trial. And it's up to us to be the witness. Who's the jury? The angels, the greater universe, the other beings. There was also another trial that we just looked at, 2 of them. The trial on the earth. Who was the trial for there? That was for Job. As we read on, the play shows out that there's lots of people involved. There was Elihu, and there was Biliad, and all kinds of unwanted friends, unhelpful friends. The trial of Job. And who's the jury? Was it Elihu? Was he the impartial jury? When we read here, Job had his 3 friends, and Elihu was not talking, and then finally he comes up, and then he doesn't become a jury. He all of a sudden becomes an accuser. Where's the defense? Who comes to Job's aid? We'll look at this trial just a little bit more at the various people that are involved. First of all, we're going to look at Satan. Satan has an accusation. 1 verse 9, he talks about the hedge. Does Job fear for nothing? Satan's also position says that Job is blameless and upright, but he says skin for skin. Satan's position is this: we only serve God to get his blessings. Removal of God's reward results in lost faith. Application of adverse stimuli or pain or suffering, like punishment, would immediately result in the extinction of God-fearing behavior. Satan says man is not strong enough to love God in spite of suffering. Adversity must always produce apostasy, moving away from God. Life is everything, says Satan. Let's look at Mrs. Job. She has a few words in here. Are you still holding on to the integrity? Curse God and die. Job 2 verse 9. Curse God and die. If we feel God is not blessing us, are we not obligated to serve Him? So hers is a little bit more simpler. If God doesn't bless us, then that means we don't have to serve Him. God didn't do His part. That makes sense. If you are suffering, says Job, it's God's fault, and God somehow screwed up. The suffering of this present time are all too much compared to the glory that will follow. It ain't worth it, says Job's wife. It ain't worth it. Curse God, the suffering will end. The glory that is to follow is not worth it, says Mrs. Job. How about Job's 3 friends? Let's look at their positions. They traveled a long way. They also wanted to comfort Job. And they were physically moved by his suffering. They sat with the guy for 7 days. You ever sat with somebody for 7 days and didn't say a word? I don't think I can go 7 minutes. You know, in some of the writings of Freud, you would see some of those sessions, those psychotherapy sessions, and you're like, 7:52, he says this. 7:53, patient says this. 8:20, the next person talks. I'm like, wait a minute, you sat in silence for an hour? Or 40 minutes? These guys sat in silence for 7 days and didn't say anything. And then they made a mistake. They began to talk. The position of Job's friends. They had 3 cycles of rebuke. The first cycle was essentially from the standpoint where God's punishment of the wicked, and He blesses those who are good. The second cycle of speeches and Job's response says, the wicked suffer and perish because they are against God. The third argument from Job's friends. God is majestic, but Job is wicked. Not too helpful, as the skip pointed out. Not too helpful to somebody who's suffering. We're not going to go through this because we're a lack of time. But Eliphaz, we heard his kind of discourse, and we can read it through there. But the bottom line is that they didn't understand the great controversy. They thought Job was sinning because he was suffering. They thought Job was sinning because he was suffering, over and over and over again. Job, you're suffering because you've sinned. Job, you suffered because you've sinned. Job says, I haven't sinned. I haven't sinned. I am right with God. Gilead says the same thing. He rebukes Job for his arrogant words, and then he goes on about God is great and man is small, and we should accept the punishment that God has because He wants to clean us up. Zophar, same thing. Zophar rebukes Job's affirmation that God should show him wisdom. He accuses Job of insulting God, reminds him that he is not on the same level of God. And maybe because he's too rich. Elihu's position. There's 4 speeches by this guy. 2nd speech, 3rd speech, 4th speech. God is great, and Job is ignorant. Still not too helpful, and not too biblical. Then God speaks. How many times in the Bible does God speak directly to one human? Not very often. When that happens, we probably should listen, huh? God speaks a lot in the Bible, but usually He speaks on big things, like a whole group of people, or a whole group of wisdom. One person, one problem affecting one man. God speaks. Job is lamenting, on and on and on. I want answers from God. I want answers from God. God says, "You want answers from me? Brace yourself, bud. This is going to hurt. Brace yourself like a man, and I will question you and answer, and you shall answer." Job 38, verse 9. God interviews Job in 2 speeches. The first interview, he says, basically that Job is limited in knowledge. Job 8, let's just look at that. Job 38, we've got a few minutes here. Job 38, 1 through 5. Because there's more about, Mike and I were talking before, there's more about creation in Job than there probably is in the Genesis story. Here's a little bit. Job 38, 1 through 3. The Lord answered Job out of the storm and said, "Who is it that that darkness might counsel, that words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man, and I will answer, I will question you, and you shall answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understood. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? Or what would its footings, or laid it the cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together, and all the angels shouted for joy." God says, "Job, you're not even on the same page. Where were you when I created the earth? Where were you when I stepped off its dimensions? Where were you when you were born?" as it later on says. He later on talks about 2 interesting beasts and beings. And if you want to have some interesting fishing nightmares, God said, "Job, go try to hook that Leviathan." I'm like, "Oh, that sounds kind of bad. Iron claws and scales that are made out of steel." So the physical and the animal world, God compares. The second interview, Yahweh challenged Job to listen in 40 verse 7. Yahweh questioned Job regarding 2 animals. We talked about that, Behemoth and Leviathan. So how does the story end? Job 42, 1 and 2. Throughout all of this time, throughout everything that has happened to Job, and this is the last thing that Job says to God: "I know you can do all things. No plan of yours can be thwarted. You have ultimate power. You ask me what obscures my counsel and knowledge. Surely I spoke of things I did not understand. I am weak and you are great," says Job. "You said, 'Listen now, and I will speak. I will question you, and you shall answer me. My ears had heard of you, but my eyes had not seen you.'" Number 3, "Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes." Job understands God is more powerful than he is. You can do all things, and for that purpose of yours can be thwarted. And no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Job prayed for his friends, and God did not destroy him. The Lord blessed the later days of Job more than the beginning, and he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. The very last line is important. Job 42, verse 16. After this, Job lived 140 years. He saw his children and their children to the 4th generations, and so he died, full of years. God restored Job. The test was over. Job passed. A few lessons. Job served the Lord out of love and devotion for him, not because he had been materially blessed. Did Job have money? Did he have material blessings? Absolutely. Was that what caused him to be serving God? No. Job trusted in the Lord in spite of these unexplained, intense suffering. It's a little tough to do. The Lord never explained himself to Job or his involvement in Job's suffering. As far as we can tell, Job never knew. Because of suffering, Job became more humble, patient, and dependent on God. The turning point in Job's life is that verse we read. Then Job replied to the Lord. When Job got on his knees, the suffering stopped. It doesn't say it in the Bible, but that's what happens. Verse 42, chapter 42, is the end of suffering. When Job got on his knees and prayed to God, the suffering ended. And this is what's so important about this whole issue of suffering in the book of Job. Suffering is not suffering because there's great learning or great meaning from suffering. Suffering is like it says down here. Suffering ended when the cosmic conflict ended. When the conflict is finished and Christ comes again, suffering will cease forever. There is no eternal hell. There is no eternal suffering. When we're in heaven, and heaven made new on the earth, the devil is done. It is over. There is no more reason to have that. Why would we have suffering if the great controversy has ended? The reason the book of Job is here, the reason that we study the book of Job, we study suffering, is because this conflict ends and God wins. The reasons for suffering in a believer's life are not necessarily related to human explanations of personal unrighteousness, but are within the scope of God's good and powerful providence, leading to the defeat of evil and to glory to himself. That's the book of Job. We're going to close with our closing song, and it is number 5.